Everybody has an interest in the dark side.
We live in a time when there's really not a whole lot that legitimately scares people or puts them in fear of their life. So
the victim is the most overlooked aspect of any crime. Every crime scene tells a story. The victim serves as a lens for what the offender was doing. And what I mean by
True Crime on Red Alert. Ride along with host Bianca Crespo and former FBI agents Ray Carr and James R. Fitzgerald for an intimate perspective on gripping, high-profile cases. This is Cold Red.
Hi, I am producer Bianca Crespo, and I am joined by my hosts Ray Carr and James R. Fitzgerald, two of the most celebrated former FBI agents in their fields. And I am joined by them today to discuss a few topics of our choosing. I'd like to throw it over to you, James, if you'd be so wonderful to share a little bit about yourself and your career and what brings us here today.
Sure, Bianca, it's great to be in this perhaps haunted studio building here in Philadelphia, my hometown. James R. Fitzgerald, Fitz is my lifelong nickname. And born and raised in this town, and went to Penn State University, then became a store detective upon graduation, a Ben Salem Township police officer, suburban Philadelphia for 11 years, patrol officer, plainclothes detective, sergeant, et cetera, et cetera. Time for a change in the late 80s, 1987, joined the FBI. After going to the academy in Quantico for 16 weeks, spent 7 years in New York City working all kinds of extortion, bank robbery, kidnapping cases, you name it. Arrested a lot of bad guys, including an FBI agent who did some things with kids he shouldn't have been doing. Worked some really big cases there, and then put in for a promotion in 1995 and was sent to the profiling unit in Quantico, Virginia. And after 12 weeks of training there, I was shipped off to the Unabomb Task Force for what was supposed to be 30 days. However, it lasted about a year and a half. And after a 17-year-long crime spree by the serial bomber known as the Unabomber, within 9 months we had Ted Kaczynski under arrest in his cabin in Lincoln, Montana. A lot of the evidence was the language analysis that my team did to compare the known writings of Ted Kaczynski to the question writings of the Unabomber, compared those, and that started a whole other branch of my career, that is forensic linguistics.
My career kind of started out graduating from college and then started working at a school for young boys. They were juvenile delinquents. It was called Glen Mills. I did that for almost 9 years, and then in 1989, I went into the FBI. Unlike Jim, I only needed 13 weeks to get through the academy. Jim needed 16, but well, that's a topic for another time.
Right.
But my first office was Buffalo, New York, and I got involved in in the first 9 months in something that usually takes agents years to get involved in. Sometimes they never touch it during their whole career, and it's called a Title III, where you actually get involved in tapping someone's phone and putting microphones in a business. And I did that to an auto parts store that was filled with corruption that went all the way up to the mayor's office. It was a pretty great case. I didn't get to see it through because I was transferred to the Philadelphia division, but other people did. And I got to Philadelphia in 1991, and they put me on the bank robbery fugitive squad. And in 2000, I get a call about a bank robber that's been robbing banks since 1987, mostly up in the Scranton area and up in the New York area, Albany division. And we discussed it, and it led into the case and the discovery of Carl Gugasian, which I wrote a book on, 30 Years on the Run, The Hunt for the Most Prolific Bank Robber in History. That's done real well. I've been on a few TV shows, Masterminds, the FBI Files, with that. There's some things working right now as far as potential development out with some studios out in LA. So we'll see how that goes.
This is all very exciting, and you both have very incredible lives, very interesting lives that I know a lot of people who haven't, been involved in.
Jim and I, we've seen a lot. I equate that to kind of having a ticket to the circus. We're in the front row at the circus. What everybody sees on TV, Jim and I get to see live.
Right.
And
Fun
there's a
for
big
you.
difference. People don't have that opportunity.
And if anything in this podcast, we want to bring on investigators, doesn't matter what their race or gender or anything like that is, but to tell us about how they put these cases together. We also want to bring in some victims to talk about what it's like to be victimized, whether it happened, one time and that's it, or over a course of a number of years. When we start talking about cases, let's go from A to Z and always have some time for the victim in there too. Not just for him or her, but also for other potential victims out there. Let's make sure they can avoid becoming victimized themselves by crimes such as the ones we may have discussed on the podcast that day, but certainly other crimes going on in the news. So
The victim is the most overlooked aspect of any crime. All people are really concerned about is, did you get the person that did this? And they forget about the victim. And the reason why most people become victims is because of their poor situational awareness. And we can help people hone that skill to become more aware of what's going on around them and not do things that are going to put them in a higher risk category of becoming the victim of a crime.
in profiling, there's a term, I know Ray is aware of this, victimology. And whenever as a behavioralist and also a linguist, I would look at a case, sure, tell me about the unknown offender and perhaps what he or she did at one or more crime scenes, but I want to know everything possible about the victim. If the victim is still alive, which in many cases we work, unfortunately they're not, so you don't have that source of information.
Correct.
But you certainly have family members, you have witnesses and people that know the victim, but if they're still alive, tell us everything you can, not just about the crime, but what even led up to the crime, the days, if not weeks, if not months before. And especially with a serial offender of some sort, serial rapist, serial murderer, you can perhaps then put together what kind of victims is this person looking for.
Every crime scene tells a story. The victim serves as a lens for what the offender was doing. And what I mean by that, there was a homicide out in Manheim Township. I think it was 2010, 2011. I don't remember the exact date, but I had a chance to go out to that crime scene, which is very rare to do that. It happened on a Friday into Saturday, and I went out on a Monday. And it was myself and another agent from Philadelphia, and we were in contact with Quantico, with the BAU at the time. And we were talking to them, and they were looking at a statement analysis, and they thought it might have been a professor at one of the daughters, at the daughter's college. I don't want to mention any colleges at this point. But what happened was they were telling us about this homicide. And what really helped me was going to the crime scene itself, walking through the crime scene as if it just happened because it was untouched, and seeing where the parents were in the bedroom and the brother, all three had been killed. The sister was also at home, but apparently the offender didn't know that, because the offender, which told me, thinking from the offender's perspective and looking at the victims, which told me that the offender and the victims knew each other, because they had to know each other, because if they didn't, he would have made sure he checked every room. But he thought that the sister's at college still, and she had just come home that day. So she had no idea. The mother and father were stabbed, and so was her brother. But when you saw the crime scene, the mother and father were not the targets of the offender. It was the brother, because you saw a little bit of blood in the parents' room, but what you saw in the brother's room was an unbelievable bloody scene, like there was a war that went on in there. And you said, here was the focus of the offender.
In order to prevent, future crimes from happening, you think it would be, at least what you both are saying is, it would be very beneficial to educate anyone who's listening how to not be a victim, how to prevent a potential crime or find themselves in a situation that is dire. And it seems like you're both saying as well that behavior on both sides factors into, what's going to happen in terms of profiling a, potential criminal or a victim, and how they behave and where they go and what they do, and if they don't check the back seat of their car when they go into the parking lot, which I do. I have a tendency to do now because it's, it's good to be, like you said, self-aware and always be aware of your surroundings, because, I mean, would you both agree that you're never truly safe?
A case that Ray and I worked together, and we were definitely successful, and it was Arthur Bomar,
Oh, yeah.
a serial killer in Delaware County.
He was
Delco.
Delaware County, he was Montgomery
Philly.
County, and Philadelphia, yeah.
And again, we don't have to get into the weeds on this case, but it didn't take long for us to determine that basically, we didn't know the name of the offender, but at least in more than one case, he had bumped the back of a car of a lone female victim. And then it looked like a little mini accident. They would get out. Next thing you know, he would then abduct the woman 2 a.m. at an interstate interchange where no one would really see it. And then that's how he would kill his victims. Well, we made sure to get that information out. Here's what's happening. This guy is like causing
Pattern,
fake
yeah.
accidents on the highway. And it turns out what really solved this case, we did some good work in profiling. We helped the investigators the best we could. But ultimately, it was a Philadelphia police officer who told he was following this case around the Philadelphia suburbs and the city itself, because the body was found by Temple University of the one woman who was the daughter of a police officer. So we have a couple different police
They call
officers.
it a hole in the wall. In other words, when they say a hole in the wall, that means there's a house, and then there's nothing in the middle. So they call it a hole in the wall. So that's how they identified it.
Which told us he knew that region of Philadelphia.
Right.
Because
He's
there was a
familiar.
number of one-way streets and dead ends. But this other Philadelphia police officer warned his young daughter, 20-something, who drives by herself at night sometimes, look, if anyone hits you, the way we've just read here in the media or watched on TV, don't stop the car there. Just keep driving to a police station, go somewhere, a
Crowded
convenience
area,
store.
something.
And she not only did that, but she was smart enough, based on what her father advised, to copy down the tag of the car.
Good.
And that was one of many leads called in, but all of a sudden, we got a hold of it along with the state police and local investigators and said, hey, this could be significant. And within a day or two, the name Arthur Bomar comes up. He was already convicted of murder in Nevada. He got out for 7 years, now living in the Philadelphia area, and we put the case together from there. So there's a case where victimology, too late for a few women, unfortunately, but at least this one woman, because her father was following the news, he had a law enforcement
survived, yeah.
background, he said, be careful if this happens, and that whole case was really put together in that regard. So
And it's very horrific that the crimes that you both have dealt with over the years, and having that unique perspective, whereas you have others who walk life and, go about their everyday lives, and, they'll dive into horror or certain, perhaps I would say like Jeffrey Dahmer, like that's become a very popular TV show. And people, at least I found, they find some sort of curiosity regarding these horrific crimes. And, we have popular true crime podcasts in general and several other TV shows on Discovery. But do you both find that, do you feel like, I suppose the question I'm trying to ask is, why is horror so popular among people today?
Everybody has an interest in the dark side. They may not all want to visit the dark side, but if I have an opportunity to view something in an environment where I'm safe and I can turn it off, I can engage in it, I could turn the lights down, I could turn the lights on, and when I'm tired, I can just remove myself. There's such an infatuation because people can't imagine what these people will do to one another. I mean, when you look at it, the human beings, mammals, we're mammals, just as many other mammals. We're the only mammal that kills their own. None of the other mammals kill their own. We do. But yet we're supposed to be the most intelligent. That's an oxymoron, I guess, when you
Yeah.
think about it. But people are intrigued because it's something that they can't imagine happening, or they can't, and they're just, what is this really like? What is it like? And I think that's what intrigues them.
From a psychological or behavioral perspective, there's a few ways of looking at this. We all know we've all been on the highways when it's an accident's in the other lane.
Yep.
But why is the lane with no accidents slowing down? Because people are rubbernecking. They want to look over and see. Not that they enjoy that something's bad happened to someone, but they want to look over to their left or to their right, depending on which way they're driving. They want to see what happened, and they want to, and intrinsically, in some portion of their brain, they're saying that, but for the grace of God or whomever, could be me, and I want to maybe look over there and see, and try to figure out, even in a split second while I'm driving by, what did that person do wrong? Because I want to make sure I don't allow something like that to happen to me. So morph that into true crime books or miniseries or documentaries, movies, whatever they may be. People have sort of a morbid fascination in that. There's a ongoing annual event. You've heard of Comic-Con. Well, there's something called Crime Con, and I was at the first two of them, and 80% of the audience was middle-aged women.
Wow.
And a lot of those women brought their teenage daughters with them. And it didn't surprise me a whole lot. Working on Criminal Minds, I knew their audience was mostly women. It trended women, and all different ages, younger to middle age. And I actually would help them, come up with some storyline ideas. Oh, here's an interesting case I worked, and here's this one. Well, we need a young, pretty victim. And if you ever watch Criminal Minds, almost every episode is about a 20-something, usually multiple women that are the victims of the serial offender.
I myself was, when I was in LA living, they needed background as well as talent to stand in for crime scene photos. And I ended up being a victim, a prostitute they dragged out of the swamp. And
Good
they
for
took
you.
pictures. I know, isn't it great to put on my resume, right? It was interesting to say the least. I remember when they were taking pictures outside, there's a man in his truck who drove by, and he started yelling. He's like, "What are you doing? What's wrong with you? I'm gonna call the cops." And I'm just here like, "No, sir, I'm alive. It's fine." But they were like, I had seen the casting call, and it was always like, whenever I'd look over the casting calls, young women. Like, it would always be young, like, women.
We live in a time when there's really not a whole lot that legitimately scares people or puts them in fear of their life. So not that we're inventing things, of course that's what novels and scary movies are about, but I think but people want a touch of reality, and for whatever reason, we can also get into that, middle-aged women, but they want to learn about real crimes. They want to be frightened for some reason that's maybe hardwired into our brains, that's how we best survive, that every day we're surviving somehow an attack from the neighboring tribe or the woolly mammoth or some other creature that would come about. We don't have that anymore. You can mostly walk the streets and be unafraid, except unless you become a crime victim.
So I have to ask, Fitz, Ray, what do you hope that others who listen to this show get from it? Like, what do you feel is a clear message you would like to send to viewers and listeners alike?
Well, I see two primary goals with a podcast such as this. Number one, let's solve existing crimes. Let's do our best to solve existing crimes. And let's prevent other crimes, other people from becoming victims of crimes. To me, they would be the two primary goals of any sort of ongoing interaction. This would be like a perhaps informative version of an entertainment venue where we can make some important inroads in both those areas. Now, we can also be entertaining. We can joke with each other a little bit when the time is right, but to solve crimes, to prevent future crimes from happening, and if a crime has happened, let's do our best. Something that's current in the news. Let's do our best to walk the listeners through step by step what may be next. Either investigative wise, either prosecution wise, defense wise, or whatever. And sort of that three-stooled approach of providing information to our listeners. That would be the goal. I think we more or less agreed upon going into this. But I don't want to say have fun doing it, because true crime, in and of itself, there are victims, so it was, in no way fun to them. But it's not going to be all dour, and I don't want people, ending listening to us and walking
In
away
their
depressed.
cars, yeah.
We're going to try to end it with a positive note and saying, you can prevent this from happening, just like Smokey Bear. You can prevent
gonna say.
forest fires. You can prevent being
Only
a crime
you.
victim.
We'll have
That's
to
right.
get that on a poster, I think.
Smokey the Bear. We're going with Smokey the Bear. I agree what he says. Jim said that beautifully. I really don't have much to add to that. I hope that this enlightens people and allows people to assist, not us, but to assist law enforcement solve the crimes that need to be solved, that they're having a problem solving. But most importantly, to provide everyone out there with the knowledge to prepare themselves so that they can prevent themselves from being the victim of a crime. I think that's where it really gets down to, because when we look about this, it's all about the victim. And if we can help people prevent themselves from becoming the victim of a crime, then that's a really positive thing that this podcast has done.
I would have to agree. I think there should be more podcasts that show respect in that regard. I think
agree.
there's too much glamorizing and less, like we spoke of previously, education and preventative measures that should be taken in order to avoid any kind of dark subject matter, any kind of crime.
I think, Bianca, and I think Jim will agree with this, every podcast that we do will end with something that they can take away, that's going to help them, either as a person, it's going to help the law enforcement, or it's going to help society. One of those three areas that it's going to help.
And Ray, what I'm going to add to that too, and I've been thinking about this for a while. Nothing disturbs me more in real crime scenarios than waking up some morning or midday, whenever it is, and you're reading about a mass shooting somewhere. And it happens in malls, it happens in
Too
churches,
common now.
in schools, of course. In a way, I'd like to talk, and neither of us are miracle workers here, and we're not going to pretend to be able to get inside the head of everyone out there. But I'm wondering if there's going to be some of those people that would listen to our program. I'm not even sure that would be the target audience we're looking for here. But if they happen to listen to Ray and Fitz have some conversations, and maybe they're contemplating some kind of bizarre act where they're going to try to hurt many people or kill many people, and of course, or worse, with a car, with hammers, with
Any
with
device,
certainly
yeah.
weapons, anything. Maybe listening to us, maybe even talking to us down the line, would be some way that we could help them too, and not to castigate them, not to denigrate them, but to say, hey, let's bring you over to the right side of thinking here, and let's avoid some kind of a bizarre incident like that. So we're going to try to really appeal to a lot of different people and types of people in this podcast. If you're curious about true crimes and you really enjoyed Manhunt Unabomber or Criminal Minds, this will be something for you.
Yes, and in conclusion, I believe, I agree with how we aim to truly educate, to inform, to respect victims and their families, but also encourage others, like I said, to be proactive. And hopefully we can make a difference in that way.
I agree.
And that being said, I would love to conclude our show, and thank you, Fitz and Ray, again for joining me and having this great outlet for such a wonderful cause, I believe, that should be, really respected. And I feel like we should close with a moment of silence for any victim of true crime.